to the Dr. DC podcast. My name is Dr. DC, and no one joining me this week. Richard's still not feeling well, so doing another solo episode. You could say that we're outside the normal version of the show. Huh? Each week, we talk about the weird and wonderful world of DC Comics, and we field questions from listeners just like you. That's right. And this week, we're talking about a team that we have not dedicated an episode to at all in the whole history of the show. Somehow, is the Outsiders. There's a bunch of different versions of this team. Lots of different characters have been on the Outsiders. And so, yeah, we're talking about that, this week. Like I said, it's just me. So I'm just chilling here. Yeah, as you know, Richard's been off sick. So, send your thoughts and prayers, but probably more importantly, send that Patreon money, baby. Just important to get that greedy plug in off the top. All right, here we go. So let's talk about the Outsiders team. If this is a team you're unfamiliar with, I just want to give a little quick bit of context here. The original team was founded by Batman when he quits the Justice League because they basically won't do what he wants. And he quits the Justice League and he joins this other team that is not necessarily bound by some of the accountability of the Justice League. And that's not to say that Batman abandons his code or anything. He doesn't, but they definitely operate differently than the Justice League. And that version of the team included Metamorpho, Black Lightning, Katana, Halo, Geoforce, characters that sometimes we've talked about, but some of them not a ton. I mean, Metamorpho, we just did an episode not all that long ago. We've done a Black Lightning episode before. Katana's come up. I don't know that we've really talked about Halo on the show before. But yeah, so this is sort of like, that's sort of the initial original version of the team. And over the years, like with any team, there have been different lineups. So like with, there's different lineups of Justice League, or there's different lineups of the Suicide Squad, or there's different lineups of the Justice League Dark or whatever. But yeah, essentially it's like it's Batman's backup team. Essentially, he quits the Justice League and starts the Outsiders. So we got a bunch of questions about the Outsiders, so let's just get right into it, shall we? Let's start by going to Threads. Threads. And first question here is from Mr. E64, who asks, how do you feel about more Bat family members joining the team? I know Batman is often in a leadership role, but I honestly prefer a lineup of heroes who aren't all from Gotham. I tend to agree with this. Like the Outsiders are sort of like extended Bat family to Batman, just because that team in almost every version of it is connected to Batman. Almost every version. I'll say one of my least favorite lineups is probably one of the most recent ones, which was this is a Batman and the Outsiders series that did include Black Lightning and Katana, but then also included Duke Thomas and Cassandra Cain. I will say, in general, I actually thought the series was decent, and I was enjoying it, and they were going up against Ra's al Ghul and stuff like that. But I think I agree with the premise of your question, which was it starts to lose something when 3/5 of the team are actual Bat family members. You know what I mean? We had Batgirl Cassandra Cain, you had the Signal Duke Thomas, and then you had Batman as well. and it does sort of rob the team of being something special and distinct. You know what I mean? At that point, it's like, just get the Bat family to do this. Like, why even have Black Lightning and Katana in there? The Bat family surely can handle this, right? What I liked about other versions of the team, in general, the makeup of the team's a little bit weird. Like I said, like, this lineup is eclectic, let's put it. And a lot of the lineups are, and other characters that have been on the team, or like the Creeper has been on a version of the team. You know, like there's a character called Looker. Lots of weird ones, basically. But I like that, you know, and I like, you know, the Outsider's name sort of speaks to that a little bit. And I think it, yeah, I don't know. To me, it just robs it of a little bit of power or whatever, because at a certain point, if there's that much Bat family on the Outsiders team, then are they really acting differently than just how the Bat family would handle a thing? And if they're not, then you go, why is it a different team? And if they are acting differently, then you go, well, then why isn't this just the way the Bat family does things? You know what I mean? Like, you start pulling apart the logic of like needing a different team for a different purpose, sort of thing. So to me, I agree. I prefer a lineup with fewer Gotham heroes in it, essentially. I like there being one. There was a version of the team that had Nightwing in, and that's fine with me. But I think in general, I kind of like to cap it there. You know, I don't think you want to be overrun with Gothamites. All right. So let's leave Threads and head on over to Instagram. Now we're going to Instagram, take some questions and answer them. And first question on Instagram comes from, oh my God, can I do this by myself? Let's try. First question on Instagram comes from ABC Brooks. Easy as 1, 2, 3 Brooks. Simple as do, re, mi Brooks. ABC Brooks. 1, 2, 3 Brooks. Baby, you and me Brooks. 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 I feel like I haven't done that in a very long time. Welcome back, ABC Brooks. This ABC Brooks says, great job podcasting solo, Doc. Who needs that Richard guy or Mrs. DC anyway? God, don't come in here and try to break up the two most significant relationships in my life. I sang you a song. My question is, which DC character that hasn't been an outsider should Batman add to the team? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, there's a run of Detective Comics, I think, in the early Rebirth era that is obviously a Bat family thing, but the character that they threw in there that I actually think would be an interesting outsider is Clayface. In that run of Detective Comics, Clayface, starts reforming, joins Batwoman, Batwoman's version of the team and stuff like that. But I think Clayface would be an interesting outsider. And that version of Clayface, you could probably just fully move him laterally over to that team, and I think it would work. It would be kind of cool. That's one that comes to mind. As far as a hero who hasn't been on the Outsiders, I mean, it's weird. Like, I think in one of the weirder versions of the Outsiders, they had like Martian Manhunter in there, and like he feels like too big for it. You know what I mean? A character that hasn't been on the Outsiders that should be. God, Boomerang's been on it, I think, before. I guess, man, it's tricky. Maybe I'd throw out there a character like Obsidian, who's part of Infinity Inc., the son of Alan Scott. Obsidian might be an interesting one. I mean, if you take that series that I said it was too Bat Family heavy, you could put Obsidian in place of Duke Thomas, because was sort of, we were exploring the light to shadow powers of Duke Thomas in that book a little bit. You could put him in there. It is an interesting power. It works differently from the other outsiders in that. It actually would make like an interesting sort of like counterpoint to Halo, a character that has sort of like radiant kind of light powers. That's kind of interesting in its own way. So yeah, Obsidian might be a character that would be cool for that. Yeah, God. This is a tricky one. I do think, as far as a hero goes, someone like Elongated Man would probably fit on that team. I don't think he's been on it, but Elongated Man would be a good one. You know, I know it feels like we're doubling down on Detective at that point, but again, simplicity of his power too is kind of cool and interesting, and yeah, I sort of dig on that. So yeah, I guess I'm saying Elongated Man, Clayface, yeah, Obsidian. Those are characters that I think would be interesting on an Outsiders team. All right, moving on to Nick Hippo 13, who asks, with all the superhero teams in the DC universe, what makes the Outsiders stand out? Are they more street level? Yeah, so like I said, Batman forms the original Outsiders basically because there's a situation happening in a country called Markovia. There's metahuman trafficking and experimentation on metahumans and all this kind of bad stuff. And Batman wants the Justice League. Baron Bedlam has staged a coup or something like that. Something like that. Batman wants them to go in and stop it. Wants the League to go in and stop it. But keep in mind that they were the Justice League of America, not just like our conception of the Justice League now is a little bit different, even if their base is in America. And even if the idea of them maybe just not willy-nilly violating sovereign borders is out there. It used to be even more explicit than that, which was that they represent America specifically, not just a way of conducting themselves internationally, but that they're sort of seen as operatives. So they're basically told they can't go, that it would cause an international incident and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. And Batman immediately is like, fine, I'm resigning and I'm making this other team and we'll do whatever the fuck we want. And that sort of sets the tone for the Outsiders. And even though each team has been slightly different or has had a slightly different mission, the general thing with the Outsiders is that they're a little more, Black Ops is the wrong word, but they are a little bit more clandestine, I guess is the way to put it. They don't have an allegiance to a nation or a thing, you know, like they have a code and stuff like that. Obviously, they're still heroes. They're not like the Suicide Squad, but they do play a little bit more in the shadows, in the underbelly of international affairs and things like that. They are more of like a team that gets deployed, I guess would be a way to put it. So, to me, that's sort of what makes them stand out. A lot of other superhero teams have maybe a more public face, you know. The Justice Society and the Justice League are extremely public. Various versions of the Justice League, all extremely public. You know, the Justice League Dark, maybe not public, but they're dealing with magic. They've got a very specific sort of purview. Yeah, I mean, just the Teen Titans, again, very public team. The regular Titans, very public team. The Outsiders, it's it's not necessarily that they are a secret, but you're not, they don't go back to like, Outsiders HQ isn't a giant O the way that Titan's Tower is a giant T. Put it that way. They're not in the big shiny Hall of Justice. The Outsiders are more secretive, more clandestine, more like a Black Ops mercenary operation kind of thing. Not that they're being paid to do missions, but in that way where they're not like in the newspaper, like, we got an interview with the Outsiders. Hey, those are the Outsiders. Hi, Outsiders. Like, no one's doing that. Like, their affiliation is a lot more guarded than other things. So that's, I think, the thing that makes them a little bit unique as a hero group, is to be like, again, not fully secret, but just not public, is a sort of interesting position for them, right? There are secret hero groups or hero initiatives or whatever, like something like Booster Gold comes to mind, right? It has to be a secret that he's good at protecting the timeline so that people don't try to kill him before he was born and shit like that, right? That's like a secret, you know? The Suicide Squad, even though it becomes more known over time, basically it always starts as a bit of a secret. The idea is that they could be thrown under the bus. It's what do they call it? Non-attributable to the United States, that they're operating for the government, basically. Those are secret groups. And then you got all your public groups. But for the Outsiders to just be like doing things and not necessarily like fully secret, but just not flouting it and sort of just doing the mission, like the mission wherever it goes, and we're not worried about the political repercussions of these things. Like, they do kind of act a little bit more in that sense like a non-attributable team, right? So in a way, Batman resigning is both petulant, and also he's sort of sparing the Justice League, because he could stay and probably force them to go in and tarnish their reputation or cause an international incident or whatever. There is something smart about recognizing the limitations of a group like the Justice League of America and starting a group that maybe has a little bit more freedom to be a bit more proactive or to take an action that, in the hands of the Justice League, these extremely powerful god beings that represent America, maybe that's a step too far. So I do think there's an element of strategy to it too. And it's an idea that you see reinvented for the Young Justice series, where the team, Young Justice, essentially operates as the Outsiders. I know there's a season of Young Justice about the Outsiders, but and that has its own kind of weird thing to me, because then it's like another team outside of the Justice League doing Black Ops kind of stuff. But there is an element of that entire show that's borrowing from the idea of the Outsiders, which is to be a little bit more Black Ops. So there you go. All right. Next question comes from Alfred Izzaddy, who asks, if the Outsiders and the Justice League fought each other, who would you bet money on winning? Team rosters of your choice. Yeah, interesting question. Here's the thing. I'll give the real answer, which is the Justice League would win. Most rosters of the Justice League, too powerful for the Outsiders. Most rosters of what I'll call the real Justice League, I think there's, the Outsiders versus Justice League International, maybe you give it to the Outsiders. The Outsiders versus Justice League Europe, maybe you give it to the Outsiders. But if we're talking like the Big Seven or like the JLU Justice League or whatever kind of versions like that, you give it to the Justice League. But when would they fight? And this is where the question is less about the stats of the characters and more about the meta narrative of the fact that they exist in a story. When they fight, it's that the Justice League is trying to preserve some sort of arbitrary political boundary or something like that. And it's not, I'm not saying that in the way where it's like the Justice League are like stooges for the status quo, but I do mean that they can only operate as freely as they do and earn and keep the trust of people by sort of maintaining some rules. If a country doesn't want them to come in, they don't come in, like stuff like that, with, few exceptions, unless like a nuke was going off or something, like, you know what I mean? They try where possible to sort of abide by human rules. It's that like it will keep people from being afraid of them, basically. The Outsiders don't have that. So theoretically, when they're fighting over something like this. We can't do this, Batman. I quit. I can do whatever the fuck I want. Blah, blah, blah. We're going to stop you. It's like, take them down. We got a job to do, right? And so they fight. And in that circumstance, you're almost always reading an outsider story. So they kind of have to be able to subdue the Justice League narratively. You know what I mean? Let's talk about the abilities of some of the Outsiders and where they could, line up. Black Lightning, extremely powerful, electrokinetic, generates his own electric power, can control electricity, can travel through electricity, can do all sorts of stuff. Very powerful character. He's also an Olympian. He's an Olympic decathlete or something. He's in great shape. He's a good fighter. He's extremely smart. Black Lightning, really, really powerful teammate in there. I would throw out there, he might be an interesting match for Aquaman. Aquaman's stronger than him and arguably faster and stuff like that. But I'm thinking just more in the sort of like electricity conducting and water and things like that. And even some hand to hand. Like I think that might be an interesting matchup. Put it that way. Green Lantern and Halo would make an interesting matchup. So again, Halo is a character who is technically a corpse inhabited by a spirit from the source, and they have an ability to they can project different color auras or halos that have different abilities, like purple heals. Sort of, which I think sort of lines up with like the idea of the purple ray from Wonder Woman. One of them's like concussive. One of them is like a magnetic attraction thing. One of them is flight. One of them is, you know what I mean? Like one of them is a shield. And basically they, on sort of Ultra Boy rules where they can only use one at a time, they can activate these different powers and they take the form of these glowing halos of light. So putting someone like that up against Green Lantern is maybe a little bit like kind of surface level, but so the sort of two light-based characters, that's kind of cool and kind of interesting. Batman and Superman, pair them off. We don't really have to dive into that because the comics have done it a million times for us. Katana and Wonder Woman, two warriors. Wonder Woman, obviously, Amazon with strength and speed and like thousands of years of training and experience and the lasso of truth and all this kind of stuff. Katana, expert swords person. And the Soul Taker's sword contains the souls of its like slain enemies, which sort of gives Katana also a little bit of like a window into the spirit world and the magic world. And I don't know precisely how you might work that into a fight with Wonder Woman, but seeing as Wonder Woman is a sort of magic adjacent character anyway, there's probably something fun you could do with that I like. Metamorpho and the Flash feel like an interesting team up because they're both sort of science-y. I mean, I know we've talked about Metamorpho. Technically, his powers come from magic, the Orb of Ra, but his ability itself is very science-y. It's about, transmutation and changing elements from one thing to another and molecular, reorganization and stuff like that. And the Flash, I mean, I know Wally is more of an engineer. Barry's more of like a chemist, scientist, but like either way, the Flash's thing is science, the application of knowledge. And so I'm also sort of setting up that fight for Flash to beat Metamorpho by just knowing more about elements, like, and knowing how to counter a being like Metamorpho. But I think that's a fun pairing, you know? Geoforce. So he has a geokinesis or terrakinesis or whatever the word is, meaning that he controls the earth. He's an earthbender, put it that way. He could do quite a lot with that. He's relatively powerful. His name is Brion Markov. I know we've talked about Geoforce before, but for those that don't remember, he's actually a prince in Markovia, the country that where all that bad stuff was happening. And his little sister, also geokinetic, is Terra, the one that joins the Teen Titans and is implicated in the Judas Contract storyline with Deathstroke. So that's a connection there. Putting Geoforce and Martian Manhunter up against each other feels uneven. But there is an element, I guess, of being geokinetic in that you are manipulating things with your mind. And so as far as like an interesting comic fight, having this guy that can control solids and stuff go up against someone that alternatively like either phases or is telekinetic or like has these other abilities is sort of interesting. Although I do suspect that's a pretty brief fight. Martian Manhunter probably wins that one pretty quickly. But yeah, I think in general, what we're saying is the Justice League would beat the Outsiders, but in a story where the Justice League is fighting the Outsiders, I'd say 9 times out of 10, it's an Outsider story. So they must at least they must beat the Justice League enough to continue the story or the mission. You know, a couple of characters might not succeed, but the rest of the team gets away or something like that. So that's my feeling about Outsiders Justice League fight. All right. Next question comes from Copy 801, who asks, is the Outsiders an eclectic enough team for James Gunn to use? So I think that's a great question. I mean, the only one that I think we know is on the radar right now is Metamorpho, who will be appearing in Superman. He's been cast. I always forget this actor's name. It's like Anthony Carrigan or something like that. He played Zaz on Gotham. He's on Barry. He played the Mist in The Flash. You'd know him as soon as you saw him. He's an interesting actor. And I think it'll be. I'm looking forward to seeing Metamorpho. We talked about it. I love Metamorpho. He's a cool character. I'm interested to see him. I think nothing's off the table with James Gunn. I think we know that he likes reclamation projects between Guardians of the Galaxy and the Suicide Squad, these opportunities for characters that maybe don't get as much love or things like that. Yeah, it's hard really to say beyond that, but the plans for the DC universe are, you know, we've been told some things, but until it gets going, it's going to be hard to tell, like, where are we in the history of this world? Obviously, lots of superheroes are there and public and exist and that sort of thing, just from the cast list for Superman, right? So you can imply, you know, that people have been around and working for a while, or that they have, like, we used to work together before, blah, 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 like that, all that kind of stuff. But I really don't know what shape it would take. Do I think the Outsiders as a team will show up? Not anytime soon, I would think. That seems like a thing that you have to at least see the Justice League before you see Batman's other team, is sort of my feeling about that. But, I mean, it's not to say that's the only way to do it, but that's my gut instinct. I don't know that the Outsiders will be a thing in the DCU under James Gunn, but I would be willing to bet the Metamorpho won't be the only character from the Outsiders that we will see. I'd put, you know, dollars to donuts that we will see Black Lightning at some point in some DCU project. Black Lightning will be in there. Katana, absolutely, we would see. Geoforce, maybe a slightly bigger question mark, but like Geoforce does kind of feel like the sort of character that James Gunn would be like, that's an interesting power. There's something in there or whatever, you know? So I suspect we will see Outsiders. I don't know if we'll see The Outsiders, is maybe the best way to put that. All right, last question on Instagram comes from it was Copy 801 before. This is Fuzz331. So cheese it. It's the Fuzz331 who asks, so Halo in Young Justice Outsiders is a mother box given sentience, grappling with their identity. Is comic Halo at all like this? How different are the changes? They're pretty similar, surprisingly. So the 4th season of Young Justice is called Outsiders. 4th season? 3rd season? I don't remember. 4th season, I think. It's called Outsiders. And in that one, we sort of actually get the Outsiders, the proper Outsiders. So on that show, a Karaki refugee named Gabrielle Doe is tortured and tested to try to activate her metagene. It doesn't work. She doesn't have a metagene, and they kill her, and they just dump her body. And meanwhile, they were also like experimenting on a mother box and torturing it or whatever. And the mother box's essence merges with the body of Gabrielle Doe and sort of comes to and doesn't really know what it is. Like, it sort of affects its consciousness. And eventually they take the name Violet Harper. And so it's this sort of higher dimensional sentience in the body of a human with some of their memories and personality, with all of these kind of the Halo powers that we talked about, a healing one, a shield one, a flying one, a few different things. And on first glance or first thought, I was like, I think that's pretty different from Halo. And then I went back and I was reading some Outsiders for this, and it's actually maybe more digestible on Young Justice, because it's not even like the comic version is the same sort of thing where the original Violet Harper dies. Although I think that one's like a criminal or like a killer or something. But that Violet Harper dies. And then a sort of higher dimensional spirit is sort of like inexplicably and like unintentionally sucked in to fill the gap where that person's soul was, and sort of merges with them and they lose their memory. And again, that sort of thing where it's like some of the personality of the old person and some of it's a higher dimensional being that doesn't remember what it is and is trying to, find its way and that sort of thing. But in that one, it's not even as simple as a mother box. It's like a different kind of sentience that also comes from the source. So the mother box, they're sentient machines. They're powered by the source, the energy of creation that's beyond the source wall, that it's very tied to Kirby's Fourth World, all this kind of stuff. So this kind of spirit, I think it's called like an oracle, but like spelled like aura. That in the comics is what bonds with Violet Harper and becomes Halo. And there's a whole thing with these oracles where it's like, if they're even near a dead body, they get sucked into it. Like, which is sort of, I'd be lying if I said I fully remembered how or why that takes place, but that's a whole thing. But when you put them on paper kind of next to each other, you go like, actually the show adapted Halo pretty close. Like, there's obvious changes, but like the fundamental idea of Halo and who Halo is as a sort of composite being is true in both. And their powers are largely similar. Yeah, it's closer than I expected it to be. I think I was thinking the show had taken more liberties with Halo, but really, other than her human origin being slightly different, like the bulk of what makes Halo Halo is true in both the comics and the show. They're basically the same, which is sort of interesting, actually. I think because, especially at that point in Young Justice, because we've set up, like, the further you go into that show, you go like, okay, but we just met this person here, or they don't know about this thing yet. And then this thing comes in and you're setting up a real specific timeline, where the first season kind of felt like, well, anything is anything. All these characters are out there and who knows what happened when. And the further in you go, the more there's like an actual like lineage of events. And by the time you get to that one, you go like, I don't know how we're setting up the Outsiders now. Young Justice has basically been that team for 3 seasons. And so many other things have to bend and contort to fit in. Like the Jason Todd stuff is like so different. You know what I mean? Or the Lorzod stuff is very different. Like a lot of other characters have to bend and twist to fit a new mold, but Halo doesn't, which is very odd, sort of interesting, actually. So having watched, if you've watched Young Justice Outsiders, you actually have a relatively good grasp of the basics of Halo's origin, and how their powers work and stuff like that, which is not to say you will know every circumstance that happened to them from the comics or you'll recognize everything, but you've got enough of a primer that if you picked up a thing, you go like, I at least know how Halo works, you won't be totally in the woods. All right. That's the last question from Instagram. Before we move on, let's take a little break.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. This time of the year can be tough. It's cold and dark outside, and you feel like you're all peopled out. How do you set boundaries and give yourself the alone time you need? Most people don't have an endless social battery. Therapy can help you listen to your body and give yourself the time to recharge. In the past few years, I have made choices that have improved every part of my life, and I honestly wouldn't have been able to do any of it without therapy. Through therapy, I have gained confidence and learned to draw important boundaries. If you want to make things better or just a bit easier, or you want somebody to talk to, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, so it's easier to fit into any schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can even switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/DrDC today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/DRDC.
And we're back. We're moving on to Reddit, where everyone's nice and no one's ever mean. And on Reddit, Ghost with a Pen asks, is Batman always connected to to the Outsiders? Is it like the cousin to the Bat Fam? Batman is often implicated with the Outsiders. The original Outsiders team is a Batman creation. Though he does eventually leave that team, and then they have to change the name of the book. Because the book was Batman and the Outsiders, and then I think they call it like Outsiders Adventures or the Adventures of the Outsiders or something like that. Batman is in many versions, or at least adjacent to many. There's one version where like Batman is presumed dead and Alfred makes a version of the Outsiders to like replace Batman because it takes 5 people to do what Batman does or whatever, But Batman has probably been the leader of 3 or 4 versions of the team. Like I said, there is a version that was put together by Arsenal and included Nightwing. Batman's not on that team. I'm pretty sure. There's a really weird version of the team that really, like, essentially doesn't bear any resemblance to the other ones. It's not even like a Black Ops group. It's more like a secret society. And that is from the New 52 Green Arrow run that I really like. The Lemire Sorrentino run of Green Arrow. It's called the Outsiders War. And that's the one where the Outsiders are these, like, 8 basically like martial arts clans. There's like the Staff Clan, the Fist Clan, the Arrow Clan, the Sword Clan, the Shield Clan, like whatever. And they each have a leader or a sort of chosen warrior or whatever, and like a and a totem item. So in that one, Katana is in there because Katana has the Soul Taker sword, and that's sort of like the totem sword of the Sword Clan, if that makes some sense. But for the it's not like the other. It wasn't like there was like, oh, and Black Lightning heads up the Fist Clan, or like, oh, Metamorpho heads up the whatever clan. Like, it wasn't the Outsider. In fact, the only connection to the Outsiders in that one is Katana. But that one made them more like a secret society, like a secret martial arts society, where you knew like who the leaders of these different groups were, like Komodo and Katana and Green Arrow and, you know, like all these kind of things, which is Bronze Tiger one of them, maybe. It's an interesting story. I really like it, but like, don't go into that thinking it's going to give you any insight into like the team usually called the Outsiders. And also, after that storyline, I don't think we've ever gone back and called any of those people Outsiders in that context anymore. Like, someone will, because it's continuity and that shit happens, but for the most part, that's a sort of like weird aberration. On the same note, like last month we read the Jimmy Olsen story in Prescribed Reading Month, and there's that group of like hippies and bikers that lived on the fucking island, and they were called the Outsiders too, right? It's just like that one doesn't mean, you know what I mean? And that came before too. That's the probably the first one called the Outsiders. Excuse me. So there's a few versions of the Outsiders that don't include Batman, but most of the versions of the team and the ones that kind of largely live up to that sort of clandestine Black Ops sort of vibe, more or less, are Batman adjacent, to the point where even the ones that don't include Batman, either Batman is presumed dead and the team is formed like in his memory, or it's like, well, Nightwing's here, he had Batman's training, we have a Batman surrogate on the team kind of idea. So there's that. Kate, Diaper Gal Kate asks, is there a Trinity-like equivalent for the Outsiders? Also, who is the most powerful? You like the Brave and the Bold version or YJ? Thanks. So the Trinity, you know, when we talk about the Trinity in DC, we talk about Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. And I think that idea of a Trinity is like, there's something sort of powerful about that, where it's like, obviously the team is bigger than them, but there is this sort of like core heart kind of idea that's maybe, I don't know, there's something powerful about it, to the point where like, I think we've gone and applied it to Marvel, where there's like the Avengers Trinity of Cap, Iron Man, and Thor. I think they feel like a Trinity, and like, I don't know if maybe you looked at Marvel, maybe they call them that earlier than we call Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman that in DC. I truly don't know, but I do think that idea is pervasive. We've talked about it before. The Justice Society, I would say the Trinity are probably Alan Scott, Jay Garrick, and for me, Carter Hall, Hawkman. But I think an argument could be made for probably a different version of that, but those would be like my 3 for the Justice Society, I think. I think a lot of teams have them, you know. I'd say it's probably Robin, Speedy, Kid Flash, if for the Teen Titans. Sorry, Aqualad and Wonder Girl, but it's probably them if we're picking like a core 3 sort of thing. Yeah, so in the context of the Outsiders, a trinity, I'll say right now, Batman isn't in it. Batman, whether or not he's the leader of the team, it's still different. It's a different relationship than his relationship with the Justice League. He's more like he is more like a general, like a field commander. Whereas in the Justice League, even though he's the tactician or whatever, and he's bossy, they're a team fully. And I do think Batman is like slightly apart from the team he assembles for the Outsiders. For me, the Trinity, and these are characters that I think we do circle back to a lot with this team, so I think it makes sense. Black Lightning is a big one. Katana is a big one. And then I'd say Metamorpho. I think those three, if you swapped out a bunch of other members and those three were there, I'd be like, this is definitely the Outsiders. Even without Metamorpho, you could do that. Or even without Katana, you could probably say that. But like truly, but that's also the same with the Justice League. You can form a Justice League without Batman. You can form a Justice League without Wonder Woman. It just feels weird. You know what I mean? But Black Lightning, Katana, and Metamorpho feel like the Outsiders trinity to me. And then you can add your other characters, your Geo-Force, your Halo, your Creeper, your Martian Manhunter, your Arsenal, whoever you want to add around that. That to me is the trinity there. Who is the most powerful? I mean, most powerful person to have ever been an Outsider has to be Martian Manhunter, like without question. Martian Manhunter has like basic, like near Kryptonian levels of strength. He can fly. He has Martian vision, which is like heat vision. He has intangibility, telepathy, shape-shifting, illusion casting, like he has so many fucking powers. And it's not just that he's so many powers, it's that he's the most powerful at all of them. So to me, it's probably Martian Manhunter for any character who has ever been an Outsider who's the most powerful. Gotta be that. Brave and the Bold version, I think, are you talking about the cartoon? Because, that version's pretty fun. The Young Justice one is tricky. I really like Black Lightning on that Young Justice show. The meme of Black Lightning versus Livewire notwithstanding. Absorbing energy is what I do. You've never had Black Lightning. Like, I can't believe it made it to air. But mostly I really like the portrayal of Jefferson Pierce on that show. Black Lightning's pretty strong. Geo-Force has quite an arc in that season, and really goes through it, and I think he's pretty interesting. Halo, really interesting on that show. Metamorpho might as well not be there. He's like, I don't even remember if he talks. And that's a real shame to me because Metamorpho's like design, I think really sucks in Young Justice. Young Justice has such a good track record with costumes and design and character design and stuff like that. But Metamorpho looks so boring. Like he's supposed to look like a weird freak, but instead he's just in like a multicolored suit kind of like, I don't like it. And so it's interesting because I would say there are good interpretations of Outsiders, but again, like the distinction I made with the James Gunn question, I don't know that it's a good portrayal of the Outsiders. What I do like is that Batman does kind of leave the Justice League and he forms this other group and they work differently. Green Arrow's in there and Black Lightning's in there. Like there's a lot of elements of Outsiders in Young Justice Outsiders, but Batman the Brave and the Bold is nice for its simplicity. You just sort of go like, and here's a group. And you just show them, and because we're not worried about drama so much on that show, that's a big relief, I think. I just realized I didn't answer the back half of the previous question, which was, is it like the cousin to the Bat Fam in terms of the Outsiders? And for me, and talking about the Young Justice season made me think of it because a couple of members of the Legion of Superheroes are in that season. And for me, the Outsiders are to Batman what the Legion is to Superman. You know, like we've got the Justice League. We have their superhero friends. We also have their families, the Super Family, the Bat Family. And then they also have this like other side. Like we also have their civilian and other, like Batman's got Gordon and Bullock and, like all that kind of stuff. And, and like Vicky Vale and Leslie Tompkins and like all those kind of characters or whatever. And then Superman's got Perry White and Jimmy and Bibbo Bibowski and all that kind of stuff. But then they also have these side teams. And so Superman has a relationship with the Legion, which is both unique to Superman and also just doesn't come up that much, really. And Batman and the Outsiders are the same way, where it's like, oh yeah, Metamorpho and Batman like have a relationship. Just in the way you go like, yeah, of course Saturn Girl knows Superman. But it's like, are we doing it all the time? Are we always bringing up like, hey, Rex Mason, like blah, blah, blah. Not really. So to me, those they sort of work that way for me, which I think is interesting. But at any rate, I just thought of that and didn't want to lose track of that. So that's it for Reddit. We're heading on over to the Doc Score. The Doc Scored. Doc scored. Doc scored. Doc scored. I must have done Barbara Ann as well, right? Have we just cycled back to me doing songs again? I truly don't remember. Download every episode, go investigate, find out if I've done Barbara Ann before. First question on the Doc Scored comes from Dami, who asks, will you please cast an Outsiders film show using only the cast of the 1983 adaptation of S.E. Hinton's novel, The Outsiders? That's a funny question. Okay. Let's give it a go. I'll see what I could do. Here we go. All right. I think this is going to be tricky. I'm going to start out the gate real hot with a pretty wild take, I think. I'm going to say Matt Dillon for Batman, which is maybe a little crazy, but let's put him in there. Matt Dillon for Batman. I also just want to say a really big hiccup in this is like, I don't know who's going to be Black Lightning. Let's just put it that way. Matt Dillon for Batman. I'm going to say Patrick Swayze for Matt Dillon for Batman. Patrick Swayze for Metamorpho, I think. I like that move. I think it's interesting. I think he'd be good at playing like a guy that was an adventurer, but also the sort of you need someone that who can really access a sort of like sensitive side of his performance. And like Patrick Swayze is such an emotional well, like considering that he's in so many movies that are just like about his body or about his fighting. Patrick Swayze is such like a deep, great emotional well. And so I think he'd be a good Rex Mason. Patrick Swayze for Rex Mason. I'm going to say Rob Lowe for Geoforce. A sort of a pretty boy prince that maybe has to grow up too fast, quick to anger, that sort of thing. So I'm going to throw him in for that. Yeah, interesting. I guess we're casting it in the era because, some of these people aren't alive anymore or things like that. Diane Lane. This is the other thing. Who's going to be fucking Katana? I really hate that. Okay, listen, we're just going to have to go with it here. I might throw Michelle Mayrink as Katana. Diane Lane as Helga Jace, who's a scientist in Markovia, like working on like testing these metahumans and like torturing them and trying to activate their metagenes and that. So sort of like a bad guy turn for Diane Lane, I think is interesting. Tom Cruise for Baron Bedlam, another bad guy move, like him being this sort of like despot that takes over Markovia kind of thing. I like that. I know he's not black, so let's just imagine suspension of disbelief. I'm not putting an actor in blackface, but I'm just going off like personality here. C. Thomas Howell for Black Lightning, I think is interesting to have him in that sort of mindset of like educator, athlete, a man with a strong moral code and a moral compass and things like that. Someone that may disagree with Batman and may stand up to him in the course of a fight or a thing like that. I think that's an interesting one for me. Ralph Macchio. Ugh, God, who could care? Yeah, tricky. And we don't have a Halo in this either, do we? Maybe Sofia Coppola. Okay, hang on. Sofia Coppola for Halo, and here's why. It's because Sofia Coppola is not that good of an actor, and I think the only way you could deploy her in this is to give her a role where it's like, you're an extra dimensional ball of light inside a corpse. Try to figure out who you are. And then every look of confusion, every lost line, every weird line reading becomes a thing that feeds into this, like, what is this being even? And that's a slightly mean way of me saying that I think Sofia Coppola should be Halo. That's kind of all I got for that one, though. That's a very difficult question. Yeah, some problematic casting in there, but, let it not be said that I didn't answer the question. Moving on. Next question comes from Fingerstripes13, who asks, in the 2003 Outsiders run, we saw a much more intense and proactive version of Nightwing leading the team, unafraid to cross international borders and ready to pull kryptonite on an interfering Superman. Would you like to see this type of characterization return for Dick Grayson after Tom Taylor leaves the title? I think it's important to note that Dick Grayson joins that team reluctantly, somewhat unwillingly. I think it's also important to note that the team was not put together by Nightwing. It's put together by Arsenal. Now, the whole thing with that team is they were kind of working in shadows in that, but their mission was not to be reactive like other superhero teams, where it's like, oh, the Fiddler's attacking the bank, let's go stop him. Or like, oh, the Legion of Doom is launching rockets, let's take them down, or whatever. In this one, they were like, there's a bunch of bad guys just out there waiting to pull their next job, waiting to do their next scheme. We should be finding them. And so this Outsiders team was like on the hunt, kind of, was the idea, which is more aggressive. And it sort of got them into heat with some of the other heroes, like Superman, like even Batman, I think. They did kind of have... Yeah, it did kind of get them in some heat. I don't necessarily hate it, but here's my ultimate take with this, is that the proactive like hunt them down kind of thing. That feels like a version of Dick that hasn't fully shaken Bruce's influence, who is still in some manner a little unconfident in his own path. And the Nightwing we have now isn't that. He's the opposite of that. And he's been rewarded for it. His optimism is looking to the future, like to proactively go and just find criminals to then imprison them before they can do something wrong or whatever, kind of flies in the face of that. And like, I guess you could say that it was an interesting run and an interesting take for the character, but I think you're undoing a message that's too powerful. You know, like, why would we, of all the things to trade in, why would we trade in a hero that believes in the best of people for one that is like pre-crime running around and, you know, that's inherently based not on trust, you know? That I don't love that. I don't think I'd want to see that version of Dick anymore. And that's not even to say I don't like Dick in that other book. I feel like we're past it. And I think that's kind of my take on it. And that's not to say that the only version of Dick moving forward could be the one that we have right now, but I think part of what I like about him is that, like, Batman's greatest success was actually providing channels and circumstances and training and tools and an example, both good and bad, to Dick about how to deal with his trauma. And Dick comes out the other side with friends, with family, with, you know, the Titans are a family, the Justice League are friends, you know, and Dick has that, and he inspires, and he believes in himself, and he pursues happiness, and he answers the call of responsibility. And it's not some sort of it's not just the vow, it's that it brings him joy. It's, you know, like, it's there are nuances in there, but I think I would worry about a more kind of aggressive Dick. We'd lose some of those things that, like, I think we need more of. We need more Supermen, and Superman and Nightwing are kind of the two big ones. Wonder Woman as well, in the same way where it's like, I like when Wonder Woman kicks ass, obviously, surprising no one, but like, and I say this as someone that, like, largely still enjoyed the New 52 Wonder Woman, but do I like that as much as I like a Wonder Woman who is more of an empathetic sort of agent and force for love and truth, or like more like a Gail Simone's, you know, Wonder Woman, or a Greg Rucka's Wonder Woman? No, I'd prefer those, right? And to go back to, like, I have a sword, I use it to cut, you know, it's like, yeah, I mean, it's technically in there. It's part of the character. I can't say it's out of character, but do I like it as much? Not really. Even if it's good, I'd still prefer the other thing, I think. So that's sort of where I'm at with it. Yeah. Next question comes from Big McLarge Huge, who asks, is Grace Choi still around in current continuity? She was the first LGBTQ comic character I discovered. Her and Thunder were a great couple. How would you reintroduce her? So yeah, Grace Choi was the paramour, the lover, the girlfriend of Thunder, Anissa Pierce, daughter of Jefferson Pierce, Black Lightning. This character is on the Black Lightning show, which is interesting. I don't know what the show did with her, but in the comics, she's also at least part Amazonian. And yeah, I mean, I like her. I mean, as far as I know, she is still alive. She's out there. But I don't think we've seen her in a long time. because to be honest, we haven't even really seen Thunder and Lightning in a very long time. Grace Choi is almost certainly out there just by the logic of all of the continuity unravelings that have happened over the last like 5 or 6 years. But specifically, I don't know when the last time she showed up was. And I suspect it probably wasn't even in context with Thunder. Yeah, interesting. How would you reintroduce her? Maybe the best way to reintroduce her would be with Thunder. Would be like almost in like the family context, the Black Lightning family. You know what I mean? Of characters. Something like that might be fun because she was an interesting character. I did like her relationship with Thunder. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have much information for you on the Grace Choi front. Yeah. Final question comes from Shambling Mound of Flowers, who asks, okay, so they're called the Outsiders, but would any of them be fun to have outdoors? Which outsider is saving a camping trip, and who is just ruining the vibe? I mean, you know who you want on a camping trip is Metamorpho. You forgot the propane? Don't worry, bro's got you covered. You need like some kindling to start the fire? Bro's got you covered. The tent sprung a leak? Guess who just became like a fucking tarp? Or whatever, a big thing of plastic. Metamorpho's got you covered, baby. That's a guy I want on a fucking camping trip. As far as like, you want Black Lightning there because he's got the dad energy of like, he'd be like, let's tell stories or like whatever. He would like keep the activities moving. I think Black Lightning would be good for that. Geoforce, great when you want to go for a swim in the lake. Maybe there's not a good diving cliff. He just makes a cool cliff, safe cliff for you to dive off of. I think he'd be good for some of that stuff. I suppose if you need to hunt and kill your own food, Katana is helpful in that regard. Or at least have someone who's like not squeamish about like, you know, meat and skewers and stuff for barbecue and whatnot. That would be good. I mean, she would also be good if you were doing the kind of camping where it's like, we're going to like cut down and build a thing, or, you know, like we're going to make our shelter or like something like that. I think Katana would be really good for that. Halo. I think Halo's not that she can't contribute, but I think Halo's largely along for the ride. It's maybe just there for vibes, slightly weird vibes. Batman's in like a $200,000 luxury camper the next like campsite over. I think is what's happening. He's in there while everyone else is outside. Bruce likes his nice things. Let's put it that way. Yeah, there you go. That's it for the questions. And that's it for the episode this week. The theme for next week, TBD, but just watch for that out on social media. If you've got a question just generally about DC, or you're waiting until that call for questions comes out, you can find us everywhere on social media as Dr. DC Podcasts. So, you know, we're on Threads, Instagram, Facebook. Reddit is r/Dr_DC. And obviously we talked about the Discord. If you want to help to support us, I gave the very cool, chill plug for it at the beginning of this episode. Patreon.com/DrDC. There's a $1, $5, $7 level. They all help to support us, but that first level gives you access to the Discord, our awesome Discord fan community, and the higher levels give you access to bonus episodes and theme polls and bonus series, rewatch series like Cerebros, where me and Matt Poulter are going through the Fox X-Men franchise. The Double Dose, we're out of prescribed reading month, although due to illness. The final prescribed reading month double will come out this week. Apologize for that. Just sometimes life gets in the way a little bit. If you want more free versions of us, go check out Ghostfacers. Ghostfacers is a supernatural rewatch podcast. Me and Richard are going through every single episode of the CW Supernatural. We're halfway through season 9 of 15 right now. We talk about real world monster lore, behind the scenes stuff about the show, and it's a really good time. It's a ton of fun. We're really thirsty for Dean over there, baby. That's it for this episode. Adios.
Ciao, ciao.
Heroes. They always fight for what is right. Live with danger and adventure. They are men of might.
This was a Brain Freeze podcast.